Today we're diving deep into one of the most infamous unsolved cases in American history, and that is the case of JonBenét Ramsey. Now we're going to be exploring the case through the lens of the book Foreign Faction: Who Really Kidnapped JonBenét. This is by James Kolar. Now this is a book, it presents a controversial but pretty well-researched perspective on what might have really happened on that tragic night in 1996. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. Psh, Sofa's back there. Psh, I'm right here. My name's Paul if you're new to the channel, and if you're not new to the channel, my name's still Paul. Now, like I said, we're going to be talking about that book, Foreign Faction. We read this for our members book club here, and what I want to do is go over some of the basics of it, and the basics really of the case, because this book does a good job at that, of just covering like all the things, right? And then we'll talk about some specific points I want to talk about from the book. So let's jump in. So on December 26, 1996, 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey from Boulder, Colorado was reported missing. Her mother, Patsy Ramsey, calls 911 after finding a ransom note, okay, we'll get to that, on the staircase. Now, hours later, her father, John Ramsey, discovers JonBenét's body in their basement. Now, the crime shocked the nation, right? If you remember this, you already know. Now, it quickly became one of the most sensational and scrutinized unsolved cases, literally, to me, in history, okay? Now, the investigation, however, was riddled with issues along the way. The police response was chaotic. The Ramseys messed up the crime scene, you know, whether that was intentional, we'll never know. Media speculation was crazy. I mean, you name it, it was going on in this case. Now, initially, authorities were kind of split between two main theories, and basically we'll just lump them into two categories. There's an unknown intruder of some sort, or intruders that broke into the house and did the crime, or someone inside the home was responsible. Okay, so those are the two main categories. You can go on many different configurations of that for each category. Now, let's start getting into some of the other stuff. Let's specifically talk, if you've been following me for this case, you already know, let's talk about one of the most baffling pieces of evidence, and it's that ransom note, okay? Now, as we've already learned, unlike most ransom notes, this one's super long, it's like 2.5 pages. It was written inside the Ramsey home on a pad belonging to Patsy Ramsey with a pin that was put back in its place. There was a demand of money in it. It was $118,000. This was the exact amount of, you know, right at it or whatever, of John Ramsey's recent bonus. Now, there was handwriting analysis done. They couldn't conclusively match Patsy to the note, but they also couldn't like say that she didn't do it either, right? There was like this very gray zone there with it. And obviously suspicions lingered. So my personal thought on it is she wrote the letter. Okay, so that's my personal opinion on it. Then there's the actual crime scene itself, okay? JonBenét is found with the groat around her poor little neck. She has a severe head injury. Now, the autopsy reveals a skull fracture, prior trauma from potentially, you know, having things done to her, adult things, if you will. Now, there was also no sign of forced entry in the house. Footprints in the snow were not there, like things that should have been there. Investigators would question whether an intruder could have actually entered the house without leaving any trace or anything like that. Okay, so let's talk about the theories very quickly that are discussed in this book. Kolar's book, it challenges the intruder theory essentially, right? It starts off and gives you a scenario with that, but then it quickly kind of derails from that, and it suggests instead that somebody within the home was responsible. Now, one of the more controversial arguments centers on JonBenét's older brother, Burke, okay? Now, according to Kolar, the writer of the book, Burke may have, again, this is allegedly, he's not been charged, anything like that. We're just talking about the book here. Burke in the book, he may have struck JonBenét during an argument. There's evidence presented, theories presented, you know, that there is pineapple. JonBenét had pineapple in her stomach. There's a bowl of pineapple in the kitchen counter, Burke's fingerprints, whole 9 yards. And a lot of people have theorized that, you know, maybe she grabbed some of his pineapple. He got upset. He did something. Now, also, let's talk about the 911 phone call. So Patsy makes a 911 phone call. Now, the audio experts claim that they can hear Burke speaking in the background. Now, if you remember, the Ramsey said that he was asleep, he wasn't up, this, that, and the other. And even in interviews, the 911 phone caller was like, oh, well, I heard more voices in the phone call because Patsy forgot to hang the phone up, apparently. And so allegedly you can hear something like, we're not talking to you. And then Burke saying something to the degree of like, what did you find? Or something like that, right? Now, authorities definitely had their suspicions, right? I mean, like right off the bat, okay? The Boulder Police Department initially focused on the Ramseys. Now, the DA's office almost seemed to like protect them, right? It was these opposing forces going on. Like they were like, we don't have enough evidence, we don't have this, we don't have that. Now, there was a grand jury convened. They voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey, in relation to this situation, like creating the environment or whatever. I can't remember exactly what it was right now off the top of my head. But a grand jury was formed and they chose to indict them. But the DA was like, nope, we're not going to do it. We don't have enough evidence. It's not going to stick. We're not going to pursue this. Now, the public didn't even know about this for a minute, okay? But you can only imagine that part right there had people bent out of shape, right? As you can only fathom so why. Now, here's the other thing too. Not everybody agrees with this theory that it was somebody in the household, whether you think it was Burke, Patsy, whatever, right? Some still believe that yes, there was some kind of an intruder. There was DNA evidence from an unknown male on her clothing, but many experts also say that could have been basically like contamination or touch DNA or things like that, right? So there's also the unusual marks on her body. Now, at first there's speculation of this is a stun gun. However, in this book here, they kind of go down another path, and it's more or less presented that it also could have been, or more likely was, a piece of train track or race car track or something like that from Burke. So there's that. Now, at the end of the day, no true suspect. Yes, we have had people confess, we've had people do this, we've had people do that. No one has been officially charged like a link of you specifically took her life, obviously other than whatever the grand jury did behind grand jury doors, right? Okay, so overall, this book, it makes a very compelling argument that this was a crime that was basically an accident and that the parents covered it up, right? He goes over, by he, I mean the author, he talks about the missteps in the investigation, the inconsistencies in the family statements, flaws in the collection process, the evidence collection process. He goes over all these things, but at the end of the day, it's just his theory, right? Just like everything else, there is theory after theory after theory after theory. So that being said, that's like the quick overview of it. What I want to do now is just kind of talk about some bullet points, some notes that I took, that type thing on specific stuff in the book. Now, what I also want to talk about specifically is the very beginning of this book, where what Kolar does is he presents, I don't know if you would call it evidence or what you would call it, but he essentially walks you through what it would have looked like if an actual foreign faction, a group of people, I think 4 men and 1 woman or whatever it was, broke in. And he's explaining where she's writing the ransom note and like other people are doing this and this one's doing that and they didn't mean to do this and okay? It's compelling, but as you're listening to it, and this is for me, I should say, so as I'm listening to it, I was like, this seems really far-fetched, right? Really far-fetched, okay? And that alone, I was just like, Now, also, let me say this. For whatever reason, don't ask me why for this book, I thought that this was literally a complete foreign faction pro book through and through. I had no idea, and I'm glad I went into it this way, knowing that he was, or the author was going to derail that conversation about that, okay? Now, another big thing with this particular book and the way it's presented, so, we walk through all that. One thing that the book does well, it does a lot of things well, is it's showing you so many different vantage points. There's one scene in there where they were talking about a police officer made note that when they were, so they've come to the house, they're doing all this and whatnot. Now, we remember the police officer who said the thing about John Ramsey. Linda, I think it was her name, where she was like, when he brought her body upstairs, we met eyes, and I knew instantly in that moment who was the killer, and I put my hand on my gun, and so on and so forth, right? Well, another person said that they made note that at one point where Patsy, and I think they described it like this, where she had her hands like this, but they called her and Patsy's doing this number, watching what they were doing, and it was very weird to them. Little red flags are going off the whole time. So there's lots of little tidbits in this book that like I didn't know about or was unaware of, right? So there's that. So that part, I was like, okay, wow. Now, also, when you want to get into the conversation of like some of the things that were present, or not present, I should say, evidence-wise. So first of all, let's talk about the lack of footprints in the snow, the cobwebs, stuff like this. One thing that the book did really well is raising these concerns up, because he was like, okay, well look, here's, on this video interview right here of 60 minutes, the detective is doing this case for how it was an intruder, and they did this and they did that, but he failed to note that these spider webs were here, and I mean, they go into all this research of it was this kind of spider, and this is the kind of webs they do, so maybe they did this and they could have opened the gate inside, but then it would have been like this. I mean, to me, at least, non-scientific way of sofa speculation, he, meaning the author, really did his homework and brought receipts on this type stuff. The snow part where it's like, well, there wasn't any really snow there to begin with, right? Also, when they talk about, by they again, I just mean the author, about how the house is laid out, about how things were blocking the door, and essentially it's like, well, if somebody was in here, how would they have opened this and done this and blah, 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 blah. The mark on the wall with a suitcase, somebody going down there already. The police officer, hey, y'all go look around the house, which is a horrible thing to do, but nonetheless, Mr. Ramsey runs right down to that room, and finds his daughter. The whole 9 yards. That whole dynamic seems so odd to me. Now again, do I know what it's like to be a parent in that situation of your child's, that happened? No, okay? I have no clue how I'd react to that. That part was very bizarre to me. Where the book, in my opinion, draws the reader to, without not really forcing it, but it's just like where the book goes with the evidence, is toward an accidental unaliving took place, most likely at the hands of Burke. Parents jump in and try and save the day. Now, another thing in that concept right there was the dynamic of, and I forget where she said it, but Patsy said something to the degree of, if I lose Burke, I have nothing to live for. And it was almost like that was spun as like, here's your motive. Here's your motive for the cover-up, right? Here's this motive here. Another thing that the author did, Kolar did very well for me, was really going down some, Patsy Ramsey lore. Now, if you remember, Patsy has passed at this point. And in the lore of Patsy Ramsey, he's going down, he really painted a picture for me of, and I don't know if superficial is the right word, but how image conscious she was. And then by proxy, that family's going to be. I mean, they had money, right? Now, were they multi-billionaires? No, but they had a lot of money. Her home is opened up for the parade of homes. Every room's decked out for Christmas. JonBenét is doing the little pageant stuff. You see where I'm going with that. And so when I slowed myself down and put myself in that realm of like, that stuff is important, that image is important, so on and so forth. And then also on the level of breaking the family up, oh my God, here we go, what do we do? It made a little bit more sense. And again, and I hate reducing things down to this statement, but tough times call for tough measures kind of a thing, or whatever. Because in my world, and we've discussed this in our member chats and whatnot, I can't wrap my mind around a parent. I can see a parent wanting to save the family and being like, oh my God, we can't lose our other child. My God, what do we do? We have to make this look like an accident or whatever. I can 100%, like, I'm sure that that's happened more than we're aware of, right? What I have a very hard time though with is that a parent would go the route of the garrote thing on the neck. To me, that's so overdone. I'm just like, I can't, how could you do that as a parent? But then on that same note, speaking of notes, the way the ransom note is done and is so incredibly over the top dramatic, the garrote is the equivalent of that in that. It's complete overkill. It's craziness. And that's where I was like, there's a theme going on here. This is absurd. This is overkill. This is overdone. Everything here. So then looking at it from that point of view, I was more like, okay, so maybe I could see them doing that. Almost like, we have to make this so horrible that no one would ever think we did it. Because you see what I'm doing? Oh, I can't imagine that they would do that to their daughter, or whatever. Well, that's why you would probably do it, right? To do that. Now, one thing the book does not discuss, but Deception Detective talked about this in his latest video, and that is Burke coming downstairs. Okay. Now, allegedly, and one thing that this book really painted out for me was the parent, meaning Patsy and John's reaction towards law enforcement and people of this nature. I mean, they lawyered up right away and they would say, oh, we're going to go do this and we're going to go do that and we're going to go talk and we're going to go do this. And it would never come to fruition. And so that part, I was just like, you know, okay, that's weird. Like, I understand if you're wanting to protect yourself, like, okay, they are thinking we're guilty and this, that, and the other. But on the same note, it's your kid, right? You're wanting to find out who did this. So that means that. Also, the way the book laid out for me the dynamic of what was going on that morning, because I'm speaking about Burke at this point. If he was allegedly asleep, okay, Patsy gets this letter. You know, there's even discrepancies that the book brings up about her saying when she goes back to JonBenét's room that she stopped along the way, but then the second time she says it, she got the letter and then ran back there. Who knows? Once I put two and two together and I start reading the letter and I realize my child is kidnapped, it's not, because I think at first I would almost think it's a joke, like a sick joke, like why would you do something like this? Like thinking of like John, like what are you trying, you know? But you're going to check on her, and when you put two and two together, she's gone immediately. Burke doesn't leave my side unless he is going with an insanely trusted family member from that point on, but he doesn't leave my sight. There is no such thing as he's just in bed sleeping. We don't want to disturb him. No, he doesn't leave my side ever after that, right? Until everything is locked down. That part was huge to me, okay? Now, also on that level of them saying like, oh, Burke never came back downstairs that night. We went home, we did this. And then in the Dr. Phil interview, he said that he went back downstairs, and Deception Detective brings this up. And also in the interview that John Ramsey did with Crime Junkie, I believe it is, she calls this out and he gets stumped up. You know, and she's like, well, Burke said he came back downstairs, and he's like, I don't think he would have meant to have said that and this, that, and the other. It's completely an inconsequential thing unless it isn't, okay? Why would you be so hung up on if Burke came back downstairs if it didn't have significance to it? You know, because this would be my response. I mean, maybe he did. I don't know. And that's kind of how Burke acted. Like, I mean, I think it was like playing with a toy or something. Like, he acted kind of very nonchalant about it. But on this same note, the parents clearly didn't want people to think that he went back downstairs. The book lays that out very nicely. Another thing that the book does, and it gets more intense with this towards the end, which is chopping out all the several other left and right turns that the case takes. Like, was it the Santa Claus? Well, no, it couldn't be because of blank. Well, was it this? Well, no, it couldn't be because of blank. Well, what about the maid? No, it wasn't her because of blank. You know, it literally for me, and when I say put blinders on, I don't mean that negative, because like say I start off with no blinders and then it starts off and it puts someone that are still casting a wide net, and it's like, okay, we're talking about the intruder theory, but then that gets a little slimmer and a little slimmer and a little slimmer until it's like, we are talking about Burke and the Ramseys. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are the options we have now left you with, okay? That part I was blown away by. Another part that was so odd to me was the basement window being broken and them not really fixing it. And it's like, why wouldn't you fix it? And Mr. Ramsey being like, well, I thought I had fixed it at one point. You know, and that just nonchalantness about that. I mean, I guess number one, it tells me like they just felt that comfortable in their little town neighborhood that nothing bad ever happens. I don't know. Also, another huge thing was Burke's behavior during the interviews with like therapists and cops and people like that. How do I expect a young child to act over the unaliving of their sister? I don't know. Again, I have no concept. I hope I never have to worry about that, right? Obviously. But I'll trust the professionals on this, okay? And where they were like, yeah, it's a little bit odd that there was no inquisitiveness about this. There was no this. He only showed emotion. I think when he was like at the casket, that was just a very basic thing. He was more concerned with eating his food than talking about the sister. There is all these behaviors there. Now, there also might be something else going on with Burke. So, of course, none of these things make him guilty, right? But there's just things that brought up that really stuck out to me in this book. Now, of course, at the center of this is, unfortunately, the fact that JonBenét lost her life. She would be a young adult at this point. I mean, not young, but, she would be an adult probably with her own family and kids at this point, right? It's completely tragic. It is tragic if it was a scenario where something accidental took place and that it was covered up, and you know, people have lived with this their whole lives, right? Because again, I don't know how the law works, but here's my big hang up with it. I personally think if Burke accidentally hit her too hard or did something, because also the book presents all this evidence of the bizarre relationship between Burke and John and some of the weird behavior things that went on with that. You know, it seemed like there was some kind of deeply embedded jealousy of her maybe, but again, who am I? It almost seems like to me if something had taken place, he was young enough to where it was like, well, he's not gonna go to prison for that. Like maybe some kind of a mental hospital or something, or a juvenile thing, like something, but like he's not spending the rest of his life in prison for that. And that also then feeds into my whole thing of Patsy being like, wait a minute, but even that for somebody with image conscience would probably be bad, right? So I don't know. Literally I go round and round with it. But yes, this book, my overall vibe on it or whatever is, number one, if you are a newcomer to the case or not a newcomer to the case, whatever, this book lays out a lot of very interesting details and facts that it's very easy to digest. I mean, I listened to this very quickly. I was just like, boom, 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 let's go, right? It keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's just a very good, like almost timeline piece to it, okay? And alternative theories than the intruder theory, but it presents several of them. For me, I left it definitely feeling like it was what I said earlier, okay? An accident occurred and it was a cover-up. So who, what, when, where, and the combination of that, I have no idea, right? And that will forever change. And honestly, come back to me in a week and I might say, if you present me a compelling enough case of an intruder theory, I'll be like, yep, okay, we're abandoning the family thing. 100% think it was an intruder. So it is what it is. Anyways, this was an amazing selection. We're going to definitely read other books from the JonBenét Ramsey case. We're going to deviate a little bit from there. We're going to be reading Levi's Eyes by Aphrodite Jones next for March. So if you want to join that, join in. Now, also, if a lot of people ask, the book club is very casual. It's for channel members and Patreons. And so that's where I'll post some videos along the way. We do a live chat once a month. It's very chill. And oftentimes, like if you don't want to read the book, you can just, you know, watch a video or something on it if you want to participate in, you know, the live chat that we do and whatnot. So I'll read the comment section. So that's it. And speaking of that comment section, if you are still watching, I greatly appreciate it. And I'd like to know what you think of the book, the case, all that in the comment section below. And while you are down there, if you could, drop some of those little sofas off down there for me and Rosco and Spirit, Bo and Luke, as well as the rest of the Sofa Squad. That way we'll have a place to sit, hang out, talk about this case, all the other cases we talk about here at the Sofa Squad. And until we all meander on down there to do that, I'll see y'all soon. I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now, don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. And then, like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Rosco on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.